here to talk about single sign-on with Flow today. So, our experience in building a solution based on Flow. And yeah, my name is Christopher Hlubek. That's my Twitter tag, if you want to follow me. I work at Network Team. That's also actually my company, and we do websites, web apps, responsive mobile with Flow and Typo3 CMS. I'm part of the Typo3 community for some years now, and I'm actively developing Typo3 Flow, also active in NEOS development, and if you use Surf, that's a project I also kickstarted, and yeah, I could call me the maintainer of Surf, but well, there's not enough time to bring it to the first stable release, but that will be the next thing. Yeah, so single sign-on. What are some words that come to your mind if you hear that? So, sign-on, what is a sign-on? Sign-on is something like a login, you would call it a login. So, there's always some confusion in these security matters, which is bad. So, sign-in is something like a registration, usually. Authentication. What is authentication? Authorization. So I will tell you what authentication really is if you don't know the meaning of authentication versus authorization. And then we have a single sign-on finally. So a lot of stuff and topics, so don't be worried. We'll figure that out. So authentication. I think most of you know that. You do that several times a day. That's why I'm here, so we can stop to always authenticate with username and password. So you, as a user, maybe not wearing a tie, but have some protected resource. So you want to access an intranet system or want to log in into your admin view of your blog or website. So you access that. And the first question of the system is, okay, who's there? Who is it? And that's really about finding your identity. So who is that? And you prove the identity most of the time by going to the protected resource. Then you will get something like a login form. You will enter username and password. So that's the most common pattern in the web, I think. And now the systems, if everything's right and the system found you, knows, okay, you're John Doe or Joe Average. And, well, you know that. You have done that yourself, maybe in almost every web app. And then you're allowed to access the resource. So, we're doing username, password over and over. And that's really a thing we repeat in every web app. So, most of the time you kickstart a web app, you need some security. Okay, let's do login, and then you have to deal with user management and storing passwords, and maybe you have you need some kind of password reset function and all that stuff, and it's really hard to get that secure and right and with a good user experience without introducing security issues. So for me, at least, well, that was too fast. We should think about if we can do something, and that's what single sign-on also is about. So one question most customers will ask or could ask for a web app is, can we store that centrally if you have several applications, and can we have only one login, and if I access another website or web app, then I'm automatically logged in. So this is what single sign-on is about. And also, if you think what we build right now or what we are used to build is like one large block of application that does a lot of stuff, and because we have the users there and we don't want another app because then we need yet another user account there. So we put every functionality into one app. I think this is one reason to do that, or why we do that sometimes. So instead I would like to think about having separated apps, only focusing on some parts of your business domain. It's easier to maintain, to upgrade these, and to focus on only some parts. But if you don't do it right, you have a bad user experience, because all the logins need to be synchronized and stuff like that, and users will notice that they access different applications actually. Yeah. So for one project, that's Robert and me, we had some requirements for exactly this use case, having separated applications acting as one suite for the clients. So there should be a seamless login over many Flow instances. So you log in one instance and you access another one, and you don't notice that in the background there's some kind of account synchronization, so you're automatically logged in. Then it should be easy to integrate that into Flow, because we already have the Flow systems, the Flow applications, and also some security stuff. So it should really integrate well into the Flow security framework. So to get some idea, how many of you have experience doing something with a Flow security framework? So, I don't know, building a custom authentication provider, or, yeah, so not so many, but it's not really hard, and I think it's a pretty solid component of Flow, and it really makes the Flow security very extensible. So then it would be very nice not to have some external Java application or server that you need to maintain for doing this single sign-on. So it would be really nice if there could be a server and a client for Flow to do the single sign-on centrally, and to support the multiple Flow applications to be part in the single sign-on. So then we have some more features. I won't go into everything, but one which is really hard to achieve with some existing solutions is that we also want to have a common expiration. So if your session is expired on one host, it should also be expired on another web app, or if you log out in one app, you should be logged out everywhere. And these are some requirements which are a little bit harder than the usual I'm logged in everywhere requirement. So we had a brief look. To be honest, I'm not really a single sign-on expert, so I made some research for single sign-on solutions, but yeah. So CAS is one which is not standardized, but is pretty common. Should be easy to set up, but is an external component. Then there's Shibboleth, which comes from an academical background, which most single sign-on implementations come from, and you see that from the techniques they use. Then there's SAML, and in SAML 2.0, I think Shibboleth got merged into SAML, and SAML is really a lot of XML and very standardized OASIS stuff, so it's pretty cool, but a lot of paperwork. And most of you know OpenID, or don't you? Yeah. So also Typo3 CMS supports OpenID, but OpenID is more about decentralizing the whole thing. So I think for most companies OpenID is not very suited, and it does not fulfill every requirement we had. So it's nice to integrate into external systems, and for you as a user to say, okay, I want to decentralize the identity management, but it's not exactly what we wanted to do. So then there's OAuth. OAuth is more about authorization than authentication. There is the possibility to do this single sign-on stuff with OAuth, but also there it does not really fit what we wanted to do. So to get some idea for SAML, which is a nice candidate, this is the structure of the docs, and then you have a long list of abbreviations and stuff you will need to learn if you really want to dig into that. So that's, I don't want to make that bad. I think it's a one standard that's commonly adopted, but we thought, okay, let's build a custom solution. Like most of the time, we are known for that in the Flow core team. Yeah. So yeah, but why? It's not something you decide in a minute. It's because first we want ease of use. We don't want people to install all kinds of dependencies and be dependent on the operating system just to get this running. Then, of course, also for us, we want to reduce the complexity. So if we can follow some standardized workflow or process for doing the single sign-on, but we can control every part, it's much easier to integrate that into Flow and to debug it and to maintain it. And then, of course, flexibility. If there is a new requirement which is needed, then it should be easier to integrate it into a custom solution than finding some hacky way to extend something that's maybe not meant to do that. So, of course, there are also some negative points like, okay, it's not open from the beginning. We will have to find some ways to maybe open it up when we see it's working. But I will come to that in the end again. Yeah, so we made some packages, and if you haven't seen the name Flowpack yet, it's an initiative to have some kind of an unofficial package repository from the Flow team or other people that have some general or some standardized quality level to say, okay, we all publish packages that have tests, have some documentation, and yeah, you know that it's not some random thing that is not supported. So, but it's not a Typo3 product, so because we cannot start a Typo3 product with every project we do. Yeah, so this one is done in cooperation with Robert, and yeah, it's already on GitHub, but we are still polishing it, so it's not really done for everyone. So, yeah, what's the basic architecture for integrating that into Flow? Here we have a server, which will be one system in your landscape, one web app, which is a Flow app, which has the single sign-on server package, and then it has some domain package, maybe your user management module or integration into your Active Directory or whatever, what you want. So it doesn't matter, you can put that into every Flow app you already have. But the idea is the server is the central role inside the single sign-on, where every single sign-on instance will connect and do the authentication against. So we call that the server as the role. There's also in some, it's called the identity provider. Maybe at some point we adapt the naming at least from them to have it somewhat consistent, but yeah. So then you have a number of applications that should be that should participate in this single sign-on. So, for example, you have your existing shop system, and you want for users to authenticate against your single sign-on server, so you don't have to manage accounts there. And you can have any number of these applications. And what you basically have to do is install the single sign-on client package, configure a few bits, and then be happy by using the single sign-on server. So these are the instances. So one server, multiple instances. Could be also more than one server, but that is more esoteric. Yeah, so let's have a look at the round trip. What you do if you access a resource on an instance that has something protected. Like, for example, think about an administration module, for example, in a shop or other application. So you don't have to use a tablet. It also works on desktop PCs. Access a protected resource, and the instance will check with you use the single sign-on client package as an authentication provider, and you have never visited this site before. At least let's think about that. So you don't have a session there. The site doesn't know you. It doesn't know your identity. So the authentication provider will do a redirect and ask the single sign-on server, do you know this session? Have you seen this visitor? And the single sign-on server can maybe respond to that and say, okay, I already have an active authentication for that, but in this example, you also never visited the server, so the server will do some authentication with you. And this is what you already know, so there you will get an authentication form with username, password, or do some external things. So everything that's an authentication provider in Flow can already be used there. We will do that in a bit more detail, so maybe then it gets more clear, and I will show you a demo. And so the server will prove your identity with some mechanism. And if the server has your identity and authenticated you, the server will bring you back to the instance. And all these dotted lines are redirects through your browser. So the browser will transfer your session, and this is very important because we also have server-to-server communication in here. So in this special redirect back, there's some information in the URL. And this is a token. I have a little token icon there. And this token can be proved on the server to say, okay, behind this token there's a certain identity with account information, like your name, birthday, roles, whatever. And to do that, the instance will take this token, access a special service on the server, and ask the server, okay, do you know this token? Is it trustworthy? Because this step 4 could be from any website on the internet. So they could just call you and say, yeah, do an authentication here. So we have to prove that it's really coming from the single sign-on server. And also, space in a URL is limited, so the server-to-server request, we can transfer a lot more information. Yeah, so the server will look up the token and return some account information, and the instance checks that information, will authenticate an account locally, and then you're able to access the protected resource. So you're just noticing some blinking inside your browser and you're on the admin interface or whatever you accessed in the first step. So yeah, confused? Yeah. Let's have a look how it looks from the outside, because it's really, the process looks more complex than it is if you use it as a user. So. So we have some demo packages already available, which have a simple setup with a user database and some commands to create dummy data. And this is the front end of the server demo. And to repeat the small round trip, we will go to the instance. This is a public site. So if you take the example of a shop system, this is just the front end of your shop, your catalog. And then I want to access something secured, and I go to the secure action, and then you see in the address bar I'm redirected back to the server, because the server doesn't know me yet. I don't have a session there. I configured a username password provider, and I will just log in there. So you can see some URL switching up there that redirects back and forth, and I'm on the restricted resource I wanted to access. And you can also see the server transferred some information. I'm logged in as an admin user, I have a certain role and have some name, and this can basically be anything you want to exchange. So also here there's some information about that. So right now you don't have any advantage other than maintaining yet another Flow instance or Flow application. But if I access another instance, so always add in slash if you use a custom top-level domain. Yeah, so here we can see I'm not authenticated yet. So also on this domain I don't have a session yet because the session cookie is bound to a domain. And so I can say, okay, let's go to the secure action here. And yeah, you saw some switching in the address bar. Now I'm authenticated. Don't have to repeat myself. So this is, you can repeat that as long as you want. You can add as many. Yeah? Yeah. No, it was almost finished. Yeah?
All installations now reside on your network, which you know is passing fast. How much is the delay and round trip times in the real environment where the systems are on different servers?
Yeah, okay, maybe we can talk about that later, but it's only on the first hit, so it's not done on every access to the resource. If I go again there, I'm really authenticated locally, so the instance knows me, and if I go again to the secure action, it's all instantly there. So it's only on the first access, and it's you have seen that that's 2 additional web requests and 1 for the server side. So of course there's some more delay on the first access, but I think it should be handleable. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the basic round trip in the demo, and of course if I log out here, I have to then if I go to the server, I'm not authenticated, and of course if I go to the instance, I'm also not authenticated. So everything is every instance is unauthenticated, because I will come to that later. We have some fancy mechanism to remotely manage the sessions of Flow applications, but also if your session would be expired on one instance, and then, or your global session, then on every Flow application where you use the single sign-on, the session would be expired. So that's some nice features to make it really consistent for the user. So let's have a look at the round trip again with some more detail, now that you have seen, first some detail about the setup, sorry. So on the server, what does a server need? The server basically has a server key pair that's a public-private key for RSA encryption, and this will be generated for you on the setup. And the server has a server identifier, and after fiddling around with a lot of names, we thought, okay, the URI of the server is always unique, so let's take this, and actually you configure the base of the SSO REST services as the server identifier. And then a server has a list of clients. So to add a new Flow instance to the single sign-on setup, you create a client domain model, or you add it to the database, and each client for the server, the server has to know about the public key of a client, and the identifier. And the identifier again is the URI of the client. So with this setup, the server knows how to talk to a client, and the client will know how to talk to a server, because everything is going over REST services there. And then you can have any number of clients. Maybe you can build a web interface for that. Right now we have a command line command to do that. Yeah, these are stored in the database, so could also come from a YAML file, so that's up to you. The package is really for the basic core functionality, and to build a single sign-on server that's ready to use, you have to do some work, but we wanted to keep it as much focused as possible. So on the client, you install the single sign-on client package and configure a client key pair that can also be generated. And of course, the client needs to know the server for going back to the server for authentication, and you also configure a URI there. And then you configure the server public key, and yeah, that's the server service base URI, and up there that's the client identifier. So these are stored in settings, because on the client we wouldn't depend that the client has a database at all, because it could be any flow app. Think about multi-persistence if you use CouchDB, or no persistence at all. So that comes from the settings, and you have some additional configuration for using this single sign-on provider. So, for example, you could also have an application that has some part of the application doing a traditional local authentication and some part of the application doing a single sign-on. Because in Flow you can configure multiple authentication providers, and that's pretty cool. So it just fits into the security framework. It's nothing special. Yeah, so what happens in the round trip? We need these public and private keys to do some encryption stuff. Of course it should be secure. And we sign and encrypt stuff in the first redirect to the server. The client will sign the message with its private key, so the server can see that it's a valid request from a client the server knows, because the clients are configured on the server. And I already told that when the server needs to do the initial authentication, then you can just use any authentication provider. What that means is it's really easy to, for example, do a lookup into an Active Directory there. So you just have a Flow app that uses a LDAP authentication provider, and you will have a central store for all your users. So this also is a nice thing because it really integrates into the Flow security framework. Or you can do OpenID there and maybe cascade different things. It's up to you. And the next step to transfer the access token back, this is also encrypted and signed from the server, so the client can check if it's valid, and the access token itself, because we cannot really trust that it's transferred through a secure channel, because it goes through the browser URL, and we only can do GET. Yeah. It's both. It's encrypted and signed. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is why we need the server-to-server communication. I will come to that in the next slide. So this slide is for the redirect back to the client. This is happening through the browser, and we need to make sure it's at least secure, and that you cannot just take the token out of that and copy it somewhere else and access private information. So this is encrypted and signed. And the next step, as Basti remembered, is doing a server-to-server call, and we call it redeem the token. So sending it to the server will look it up and delete it and send some account information back. So this is needed because we need to transfer more information than that would fit in a URL if we would encrypt it. Because if you encrypt a larger number of text, it will get pretty large, and you couldn't use that in the redirect URL back to the client. And this is also what most single sign-on implementations do. So also SAML, for example, uses that to transfer information about the identity. Yeah? Yeah, and we wanted to make sure that the client, Robert has a valid point there, if yeah, once in a while. So if you would just copy this URL and paste it again, you should not be authenticated because maybe you copied the URL to a friend, to another machine, and he never did the authentication on the server in the first step. So the authentication itself shouldn't come from this URL because it's really too easy to mangle with that. And this server-to-server request should go through SSL. If you don't have SSL or any other means, we have a signed request mechanism there to at least see that these requests are safe and coming from a trusted resource. And these cannot be replayed because you cannot get them in your browser. So you don't see these requests, they are happening behind from flow to flow and are an additional security measure. So then the client gets a lot of get any account information back from the server, and the client will build a local account. So it's up to you what you do there. So you can just build a transient account. So that means just build a one-time account model, instantiate that, authenticate that, and put it into the session. So that's what the basic implementation does. But you could also look up the account in a database locally and use that if there's some more information belonging to account. Or you could create an account in the database on the first access. So this is not limited to only one solution. So we have a class there which you can extend to implement your own strategy. And we deliver a default one that's good enough for just doing these secured resources. So yeah, in this step, after everything was verified, you're authenticated. So let's have a look at some features. Yeah, first of all, it works, and we could implement any requirement we had, so that's nice. We have a good flow security framework integration with that. It's pretty easy and flexible to implement or extend custom functionality. And like I said again, the single sign-on on the instance and on the server uses the default authentication provider. So the single sign-on on the instance is just another authentication provider. So there's no magic involved there for being part in for participating in the single sign-on, and you can reuse the providers on the single sign-on server. So you could use anything that's already developed or develop your own authentication scheme. And you can store any user information on the server or get it from an external directory, implement one class to map it to some data your clients can understand. So maybe you are using roles inside your company with a special meaning, and you need to map that to roles that flow applications can understand. So we have some extension points there where you can just decide what your best strategy is to do that, to do in these places. Then I talked about that. We have this expiration synchronization. So what we basically do is we do some kind of a ping. So you can configure a number of seconds, And for example, if for 30 seconds no ping to the server was made, there's a server-side request to check if the global session on the single sign-on server is still active. So the client will send your session identifier to the server, and the server can respond, okay, it's still active, proceed. So this means basically if you're very paranoid, you can just put this to 1 second or to 0, and on every request you check if the session is still valid. Yeah, Robert again? Yeah, Robert just mentioned that we do that in the after shutdown, so this is basically after the user got the content. So the browser will display the response, and then we do the heavy lifting. So yeah, that's right. Then we have a single sign-off. That's actually a term. I also learned that. Where we have this logout that's synchronized. I log out on a server or on some instance, and I'm logged out everywhere. And another nice feature is we can re-log in on the server, and the new account information is transferred to any instance. And we can also use that to switch the account. You know, the account switching in Typo3 CMS. So that's basically also possible in the single sign-on context. You can, if you have more privileges, you can just select any account and say, okay, I want to use this account now. Or if you have some multi-tenant setup, maybe your account has access to other customers or tenants, and you can select any account you're able to use that. So we also have some extensions points there because the UI for that will come from your application, but it should be pretty easy to use. Yeah, and Robert told that in the keynote. For this project particularly, we extended the flow session and freed us from the PHP session implementation, which is not really thought to, it's not really possible to access a PHP session without a web context. So for example, on the command line, you wouldn't be able to access any PHP session. Then you would need some low-level hacks to go into the temp directory and check files, and this wouldn't work with any other implementation, which is also scalable, like using Memcache, Ryuk, Redis, whatever to store sessions, and this was also a thing we thought about. So with the PHP you can have session handlers, but you are not really able to have a remote session handling because sessions are not in the scope of what you can directly manipulate. It's only it's something the PHP language will do for you. So Flow now doesn't use the PHP session at all, and this makes a lot of things possible that weren't before. Yeah, like I told, the sessions of instances can be managed remotely, and also on the server you can see a list of active logins and can say, no, I want to log this one out, I don't want him to be active, and stuff like that, or see how long they are active and when they expire, and that's really nice also to see what's happening on your system. I can show that in the demo. Yeah, that's this point. And like I said, you can have any cached backend for the session implementation. So we already have a large number, and there are some packages, and I just played around, for example, with Ryuk, which is a nice solution to have really scalable setups, and I think there are a lot of possibilities to, especially for clustered setups of Flow applications. Yeah, some more information about the development process. So one thing when you do something security related is to have a strong focus on quality, and of course we build a lot of tests, and it's not only about unit and functional tests, but in these single sign-on setups there are so many scenarios. I log in here, I go there, and then I shouldn't be logged in here, or maybe I should, and so you cannot remember that in your head, and it's very errors because also you're working over multiple domains, over multiple applications, and so this was where I really looked into Behat for doing this with the BDD style testing. I mean, you could also do that in pure PHP, but this also served as a nice specification for the scenarios we had and having some user stories. So this is an example. So there's some scenario, the protected resource, an instance redirects to the server login. If I don't have a session, that's the background over there. I'm not authenticated on the server or the instance. And I mean, without telling you much about Behat, you will understand that, right? What's there. So, given I am on the instance homepage, okay, I go there in the browser. When I click on the link, go to secure action, okay, you see the link. Then I should be redirected to the server. You can see that in the address bar. And I should see a login form. That's easy to understand, easy to follow. If there's an error, you can directly reproduce it. And we have that for a lot of scenarios, also for the more esoteric ones, which you wouldn't think in the first time. And yeah, that's really valuable and a nice addition to functional tests and unit tests, because functional tests are not from the outside enough to do this kind of testing. So then, of course, we have some unit and functional tests. For example, the encryption and verification stuff, or building the correct URLs. That's perfectly fine to do that in a unit test. And to deliver that, because you need to configure some flow applications and have some settings and stuff like that. And it's not hard, but sometimes it wasn't reproducible. So we built a setup with Vagrant and Chef Solo to have it running without any configuration problems. Yeah, so what's the current status and what's coming next? So we are in the integration phase into the first customer project, and after that we are planning to make this stable for everyone. So I think it's working pretty well, but it needs some more polishing. Of course, documentation, the one thing we don't like so much as coding, but to make this really useful, we have to add some more documentation, how to use that, and really see maybe in another pilot project that it really fits, and then we will open it up. But I mean, the code is open source, it's available, but it's not in the 1.0 phase for the public. Yeah, so one thing I already thought about is that now that we have this running thing where we could look again if we could open it up by doing some standardized ways and maybe integrating some, but I think it was still a good decision to focus on the user side and to see that the requirements are solved, and then maybe look if we find another solution, because also now we have a lot of scenarios and tests, and if we change anything we can validate that it will still work. So we will see that. Yeah, any questions? Yeah?
What if you would like to customize the login area into applications, for example, toy shop, bookshop, whatever shop, and you would like to have the user authorized in some other, if you log in bookshop, toy shop should be authorized automatically, but you don't want to, you want to keep the experience of toy shop if it's not logged in.
Yeah, so the question was what you can do if you want to customize the login form depending on where the user comes from. So, of course, this should be possible because you have the information from which client the user is transferred. So, for example, you could have different layouts inside your SSO server. I don't know if you would want to do that, but maybe one feature that we could think about is having some redirect taking you back to a login form on the client and then do the login there, but I'm not sure about that. That would still need some other things to solve. But just presenting different login forms on the server depending on the client shouldn't be a problem, because we have the information from which client the request came. So on the first redirect URL there's a client identifier, and then we could just have different authentication providers or template settings for that. Yeah?
Maybe I already know the answer, but do you have an implementation for Typo3 CMS to use it as an instance, to use a single sign-on?
No, not yet, but that would also be a very interesting thing to integrate it, to have the basic logic that an instance needs to do as a PHP library outside of Flow. But it wouldn't be a first-level citizen, because the problem is the PHP session is not fully manageable. So you wouldn't have the possibility to do these nice server-to-server notifications about expired sessions, or have the synchronized logout, because this all runs through server-side requests and not through the client. And so, yeah, for the login that would work, but for the rest of the features that would mean it's not supported as well as the Flow application.